Kupata information unataka. Life ni journey pia ni process. For every step una make, it brings a different outcome. It always comes together.
Everything in life is a process. Life is a journey. Believe in the process. Everything in life comes together. Life is a journey. Believe in the process. Inspiring, informing, and impacting. This is The Connect.
A very good evening to everybody tonight from wherever you're watching us. Thank you so much for you taking your time to joining us. And for everybody who's been joining every Saturday, 7:30, we say thank you very much. That shows that you're supporting the channel and we can feel your love from wherever we are. We want you to be very, let's see those comments down there. Let's see where you've tuned in from and where you joined us from. And today I start with a very basic comment, and it says, we are not, we're not the evidences of our circumstances or biology, but on how we react to those events. So tonight we're joined by a very great man. I've spent some few days just getting to know him, and I didn't know him before, but just that small time we've spent together, I've already learned something. He's already inspired me and changed the way I look at things in terms of mental health and mental illness. So tonight we have a very great guest with us tonight, and he goes by the name Dr. Elijah. Dr. Elijah Marangu is a senior lecturer at Nikeri Institute and Deakin University here in Melbourne, Australia. He has research interests, capacity building strategies for mental health in low-income settings. His recent research project involved assessment of gaps in mental health care in our country, Kenya, and mental health literacy survey among the healthcare workers in any care settings. I think that is in Kenya. Elijah has experience working as a psychiatric nurse in Kenya, South Africa, and here in Australia. So today I know we are joined by a special great man. He's a subject matter expert in terms of mental health. And without any further ado, I want us to give a very warm welcome to one and only Dr. Elijah Marangu. Dr. Karibu sana. Thank you for joining us tonight. I want us to have a bit of, at least a background and a bit of introduction just to understand what made you go into mental health, at least, and then maybe just for people to know who's Dr. Elijah and why you actually went into mental health in the first place. Dr. Elijah.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you very much for this opportunity to have this conversation with our community. I really appreciate it. Thank you for that introduction. I think you have alluded to quite a bit about my background, so I thank you for that. And I also want to commend you for deliberately choosing to use your platform to shed some light on this issue of mental health and mental illness. I think it does not happen every day. And I hope that this is just the beginning and that there is going to be more conversations like this in the future. So you asked me a question about how I chose or what prompted me to get into the mental health space. I'm not sure that I have a clear-cut answer to that, but other than to say that when I set out professionally, as you said, I trained as a nurse in Kenya. I did not work there for very long before I made a decision that I needed to look outside and see what was possible out there. And in those days, South Africa was the happening place. So I moved to South Africa. And one of the things which was happening then, and actually when I went there, my intention was just to be able to access university education more than anything else, because we did not have as many universities then as we do now in Kenya. So I went to South Africa with the sole purpose of wanting to improve myself. But when I got there, South Africa was emerging from apartheid, obviously, and they were very conscious of the trauma that was associated with apartheid, and a lot of people that lived in rural parts of South Africa and some of the urban parts needed a lot of mental health care as they emerged from apartheid. So there were quite a number of non-government organizations and even the government that was actually making training easily accessible to people who wanted to do mental health. And so I would say I was at the right place at the right time, and I got very many opportunities. And I went to the University of South Africa, did my degree there, got sponsored to do a specific one-year course in psychiatric nursing. And from then on, I continued doing my own development work before coming to Australia. So that's probably a long-winded answer, but that's how I got where I am today. So I credit South Africa for a lot of what I do today. Thank you.
So today, Doctor, before we start, we just want to put a disclaimer out there, because what we're going to discuss today might have, might arouse some feelings, and maybe might point to an issue maybe starting to happen, or maybe has already been there. And tonight we want to say it is possible that the content covered in this discussion forum may cause psychological distress to some people. So in the first instance, please contact your GP or any appropriate healthcare professional. We have lifeline number there, which is 131114. And we also have what we call Beyond Blue, which their number is 1300224636. So tonight we're going to cover on the context of mental health and mental illness. I like how, Doctor, you actually corrected me just the other day. We were having this discussion, and I kept mentioning what is mental health illness. And you corrected me and said there's a difference between mental health and mental illness. So maybe we can start off there, Dr. Ari. So what is the major difference between mental health and mental illness?
Thank you, Peter. So what a lot of people conflate, or they confuse mental health and mental illness, and some deliberately so. So the conversation you and I had was probably more to do with, is it okay to talk about mental illness when it's mental illness, or should we always use mental health alongside it? And from where I sit, that it's not a philosophical position, it's just not right to keep confusing those two. We all aspire to enjoy good mental health. So that needs to be very clear from the outset. And when we experience the illness, we need to talk about what type of illness we are experiencing. And I'm hoping that from a conversation like this, we can be able to distinguish what mental illness is and what mental health is. And these are not my definitions, and I'm assuming that slide is there for everyone to see. But other than to say, when we talk about mental health, the best ones that best describe this are those that the World Health Organization has put out there, that tell us that mental illness is when we are able to realize our potential, when we can cope with everyday life, when we can be able to be productive members of our community. That is what good mental health is. Now, there are many things that come in the way, and we may not be able to enjoy that state of mental health. And that is when we talk about mental illness. Now, the definition there for mental illness is probably a bit clinical, but all it says is that when people have a set of symptoms that relate to mood, that relate to how they think, that relate to executive functions such as judgment, then we can say that, or when there is some level of distress, then we can say that those people are experiencing some type of mental illness. And so it is, you are correct, Peter, to say that we should not be conflating those terms. We should not be using them interchangeably. If it's an illness, it's an illness. We should call it so. After all, if we have a cancer center, we don't load it with a lot of other terms. We just call it that, cancer center. So if it's depression we are talking about, if it's anxiety we are talking about, let's not just put healthy into it, because that sort of misses the point. And I guess this also has something that to do with stigma, which is probably beyond the scope of what we are covering here today. But the fact that we feel that we should not refer to things as they are, and probably unhealthy in, probably tells us quite a bit about where we have come from in appreciating mental illness. I hope that answers.
Yeah, that sheds a bit of light, Daktari. But tonight I want us to maybe dig in a little bit on mental illness. So maybe what are some of the causes or myths just that follow up with mental illnesses? What really causes this mental illness that we've come to hear that is really a growing concern within our communities?
So many things, really, and thank you. So the one point that I would like to make is that mental illness affects, it's just like the weather. It's good to think of it as happening in a continuum, that the two descriptions I've just given before, which tell you what mental illness is and what mental health is, they they are not discrete. So they don't happen. It's not like you wake up one day and you are mentally ill. There is a series of events that happen for people to experience some level of distress that then give us those sets of symptoms that we describe as mental illness. So it is helpful to think of mental illness as happening in a continuum where people begin okay, then they begin to have a number of issues, either because of things that they are doing or things that are occurring in their lives without their control. And so we like to look at that as happening in a continuum. And maybe the best example I can give is, for example, if you have experienced grief, if you have lost a loved one, or if you have lost a significant relationship, or if you have, for example, lost property, for example, if you have been auctioned, as an example, that can trigger a series of things, and how you adjust to that can put your mind at significant distress, where you are able to present with a set of symptoms that we are able to describe then as maybe signs of anxiety, maybe signs of depression, maybe even signs of psychosis. It's also entirely possible that these things can occur without any significant happening in your life, which means they might have something that you are born with, which in medical terms we call genetic predisposition, which means you are born with a certain with certain genes that can predispose you to developing mental illness easier than someone else or than the next person. And we won't probably go into much detail about that, but that's the brief explanation about it. The only point I want to make here, and I make it in that slide there, is anyone can become mentally ill given the right circumstances. And the times we live in at the moment with COVID have probably served to make that very point, that if we are living in circumstances where we are very restricted, people are losing work, people are experiencing relationship difficulties at home, young kids are having to spend time in very restricted environments when the natural thing for them would be to go out there and play sport, etc., then that can probably tip you over the edge, and you can experience some level of destabilization in your mental health. That's as much as I would like to say, and hopefully at some point in the future we might be able to talk about specific issues that contribute to mental illness.
That actually brings it to a very good point where some of these things are they really common, or do they just happen randomly? Are they common, doctor?
Yes. So if you're asking about mental illness itself, that really probably gives me an opportunity to talk about the most important thing that I would like to say tonight, which is that mental illness is common. It affects a lot of people. I'm sure those of us that live here in Australia will be very familiar with the common statistics that are bandied around, which is 1 in 5 people will experience mental illness in our community, and um, that mental illness, unfortunately, the incidence, or what we call the how common it is, decreases with age. So we tend to see a lot of younger people experiencing mental illness, and different um, uh, different sources of literature will tell you that people 18 to 24 years old at the highest risk, but some, especially American literature now, seems to tell us that that age group is even younger, so that people as young as 14 to mid 20s are at the highest risk of developing mental illness. Why that is, why this age group seems to be going lower and lower, is probably beyond what we are discussing today, and you can speculate why that might be the case. Some people think social media contributes to that. Some people think the easy access to drugs, alcohol, etc., is probably a contributing factor. The other point I like to make, Peter, in connection to that question you have asked about how common this is while mental illness is common, affecting roughly 25% of the people, we still don't have the technology to be able to tell us whether you're actually experiencing mental illness. And that's what makes this problem particularly difficult and profound to be able to deal with. Like when you have a chest infection, you can go and see your GP, and they may order a laboratory test, or they might ask you to go and have a CT scan or a chest X-ray, and they will be able to know what is wrong with you. That's not exactly those investigations are not particularly helpful for mental illness, and so it's a very difficult condition to diagnose. It is very subjective and very dependent on the clinician or the doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists' skills to be able to look at the set of symptoms and arrive at the right conclusion. I like to make the point here that unlike COVID-19, you cannot catch mental illness from another person. And I deliberately put that there because there is a lot of stigma around mental illness. A lot of that is informed by some of our cultural beliefs. But it's important that we dispel the myth that if you are out there trying to assist someone who has mental illness, some of those symptoms might affect you. They don't. Women are more likely than men to seek and use services. Again, there are cultural variations around that. But I think in our culture, for those of you here who are mostly Kenyan, you'll probably agree with that men don't want to go out there and talk about this illness and how it affects them. And that's a particularly problematic thing. Another point to make is that in Australia, the prevalence or how common mental illness is exactly the same for people born overseas, like some of us, as it is to those who are born in Australia. So it is not true to say that because we are such resilient people, because of all the things and experiences we have had, growing, some of us, not everyone, growing out of areas of hardship, struggling and making it all the way to Australia, it does not mean that you are bulletproof and you cannot develop mental illness. You can develop mental illness just like any other person. Many, and I think that last point is really important to make, that mental illness is often associated with aggression and violence, and that is not true. And many people working in our emergency departments will probably support that point and tell you that the high incidences of aggression that we tend to see have nothing to do with mental illness.
So I wanted to ask something maybe out of what we are discussing tonight, and I wanted to find out from you, Doctor, how can we be able to maybe fight stigma? Maybe just touch on stigma a little bit, because stigma is a big thing and it makes our people not want to talk, maybe to open up to someone. How can we be able to curb maybe stigma? Do you have maybe a way we can be able to maybe fight stigma?
Really good question. Thank you for that. All I say is we have opportunities every time. You hear a friend is struggling and they are coming across as doing something which is out of character for them. What you do can be the first step in fighting stigma. What do you do when you hear that your friend is drinking over and above how they normally drink? What do you do when you hear someone is isolating themselves, spending a lot of time in their bedroom and not coming out to interact with other people? Do you go out there and scandalize them? Do you start talking about this on Facebook and WhatsApp with your friends, or do you actually go out and look after them and find out why it is that they are not coming out? And do you go out there and ask them, hey, I've realized that you are probably overindulging in alcohol? What you do can be the very first step in doing this. So I suggest that the most potent strategy against stigma is probably to look after one another, probably to talk and be that person that goes and looks out and seeks out this person and finds out why it is that they are not functioning as well as they used to, find out why it is that they are isolating themselves, why it is that they are not as communicative. That is not being intrusive. That is just good practice. And if they are indeed your friends, then you should be talking to them and not probably talking about all the weird things they are doing. I have known of cases where people present even with psychotic behavior, which is just seeming to be chatting to themselves, and people actually freak out and think that this person has, God manned, as we colloquially put it. You have a responsibility to care for that person. And so I suggest that instead of waiting for someone to be in a position of crisis, let us be those people that go out and try to help them out. That would be the best way of dealing with stigma. And also look at this as any other illness. It is just another illness, and it is treatable in most cases.
I like that part where you're saying it's just like any other illness, because when you have a headache, you always maybe go and find a Panadol, or if you're having a heartache or stomach ache, you actually go and see the doctor. But when it comes to your mental health, I think we prolong and we don't even seek help. So tonight we're just saying there's help out there. Please, if you feel you have any issues and you need to talk to someone, please, there's ways you can get help. So today we're gonna dig in a little bit deeper. I know we mentioned a little bit, but I know there are a few causes. There's biological, the physical, and all those causes. So I want you to maybe touch on a few of the major and main causes of mental illness.
So without going into much detail, and I'm hoping that you are able to share that slide which has 3 circles. Is that correct?
Yes.
Peter, can I make that assumption?
Yes.
So if you are
Yes.
sharing that slide which has 3 circles, it shows the point I want to make is not to speak to each of them. It can take up to a year to just be able to unpack this stuff. But when we say that mental illness is a medical condition, it is because in the most instance, doctors have been able to do research and find out that there is a biological connection or nexus for mental illness. Now, mental illness is very complex, and I guess that diagram there shows you the complexities around mental illness. It is possible for someone to be genetically predisposed, which we call genetic vulnerability, which means they by birth they have come from a family that has history of mental illness. The purpose of this chat talk is not to make you feel afraid or to start diagnosing yourself or to begin worrying about whether you are going to develop mental illness. A lot of us have genetic predisposition, and we can take care of ourselves, and we can have good supportive relationships and environments that mean that we are not going to go on and develop mental illness. But genetic vulnerability is one of the key thing, is one thing that might contribute, not to a big percentage, but for major mental disorders such as schizophrenia, bipolar, and depression in particular. When someone has that genetic vulnerability, it is considered to be a high risk factor to developing mental illness. Not necessarily that someone who has a parent who has mental illness that they are going to develop mental illness, but they have that risk factor. Just like if you have sickle cell disease, then it is possible that your offspring may go on to have that illness. There is something that we call neurochemistry, which means there is the neurotransmitters are embarrassed, and that can as well give you some of the major mental disorders as well. Now, there are other factors there which I don't want to go into, but I just wanted to speak to a few things which you can see on that chart. When we talk about the socio-environmental factors and we talk about drugs, diet, a lot of research is being done now that is showing a lot of relationship between what we eat and how healthy we are, not just physically, but even mentally. There is also the socioeconomic status, family circumstances. Relationships are really important, and if people are not enjoying that, that can be a problem. Trauma, especially trauma in early childhood, is a very big issue, and a lot of research is being done in this space, which shows that people who have experienced significant traumatic events in early childhood sometimes can have some of the more common types of mental illness. And then, of course, there is the attitudes and beliefs that we have grown up with socially. Those can be contributing factors. And this has a lot to do with the more rarer types of mental illness, such as obsessive compulsive disorder. Then we tend to see those are their cause is more explained by looking at the psychological dimension of those three diagrams that you see there. So these are important things. The one thing which is not included there, which we need to actually it is there because it is physical health. There is a very strong relationship between how healthy you are and your risk of experiencing mental illness. So that people who have chronic disease, probably chronic pain, it's possible for them to experience things like some forms of anxiety and some forms of depression. And what we say is that if you are seeing a GP, it is possible that they are going to advise that there is an inherent risk factor when you're experiencing some of these types of illness, and it's good for you to gather the plan how to try and overcome those. So if you are going to experience chronic pain, you are going to take some medication to help you relax, to help you sleep better. Some of those medications can be habit forming or can be addictive, and that can bring on other issues which were not anticipated. So we need to think about that. But Peter, just as a way of summarizing this, it is to say that mental illness does not have a single cause. The causes can help to reinforce one another and make your situation worse. So for example, someone who has got genetic vulnerability, they have got that neurotransmitter imbalance, and then they have been exposed to trauma. So think about those people who are coming here from Syria or from South Sudan or from wherever as refugees. They have been through really traumatic experiences, or even more milder forms of trauma. Having all those risks make it a lot more difficult for your mental health, and it's possible that those can contribute to mental illness. But as I said, to just reinforce the point that I made earlier, we don't have very quick, firm answers to what causes mental illness. And that is why you cannot be told, go and do this test and we will know exactly what caused it, and then we can treat it. I hope that helps.
That really helps, Dr. And I wanted tonight just to narrow it a bit further down and just maybe talk about, maybe mention a few types of mental illnesses tonight. So what are a few of the mental illnesses that maybe our viewers tonight should be aware of?
Yes, so there are many types of mental illness, and people sometimes use certain types of mental illness in their everyday speak. So it's not uncommon to hear people saying, I am depressed. They don't mean they are depressed really, because a lot of people that we know who are depressed may not even be able to articulate the fact that they are depressed. So the commonest types of mental illness today are anxiety conditions, and anxiety, there are many types of anxiety disorders. So we won't go into that. There is generalized anxiety disorder. There is there are different form. There is uh, uh, some types of anxiety disorders that are more common than others. There is depression, and depression does appear to be increasing, unfortunately, and this is increasing. This is contributing to the biggest burden of disease that is attributable to mental illness today. We are tending to see more cases of eating disorders among young kids, especially girls. And there are also psychotic disorders which are significantly complicated by drug and alcohol use. And the addictive disorders. And in addictive disorders, I include things like gambling. I include things like addiction to social media, for example. And people are doing a lot of studies and showing how adverse that is affecting the community. The others which are less common, and that include bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. These affect less than 1% to 1.5% of any population. Then there are personality disorders. Some people might even disagree with me and say personality disorders are more common. They are not as rare. And then there is panic disorder, the post-traumatic stress disorder. Some people have argued that post-COVID, we might see a big rise in the incidence of post-traumatic stress disorder. And they may very well be right, because those of us who have spent a lot of time locked up and we've not been able to travel, probably people have lost families overseas and they have not been able to go and see them. There might be ripple effects of that in the medium to long term, and I think it's good that we appreciate that post-traumatic stress is not just an illness that affects people who have been to war. It can also affect people who are in the conditions which we are living today.
So maybe to help out someone out there, because one you've mentioned is addictive disorder, which you've narrowed down to social media. How can someone maybe balance or try and stop, or try and have less addiction to social media? Maybe do you have something you can share with our viewers tonight? And then after that, we're going to take a short break. And then after that, we're going to continue with this story. But before that, maybe you can help someone out there how they can cut down on social media and a few of those addictive disorders.
I'm not sure that I've got answers to that, Peter, but other than to say, if you think that you are spending too much time on social media, maybe you are. And maybe you want to mix up and do things that you used to do before, probably spend more time doing other things than just looking at the screen. This is easier said than done for both young and old. The screen sometimes is all we have, especially in these times when we've been locked up. So people just look at their computer, their iPad, or their mobile phone. So I think just mixing it up and doing a little bit more. get off that and read a book. Maybe I really feel very, very unqualified to advise on that, but I think find something else that is a distraction. And if maybe Peter, your audience might have ideas that have worked for them, and they might be able to share those so that we know how they deal with social media, how they did, get themselves off social media.
I like that point because now we want to hear from you guys who are watching tonight or whenever you watch this. How do you do to just minimize your addiction to social media? Because that's one big thing that we actually getting to see that people are actually addicted to screens. So we're going to take a short break. And when we return from that short break, we're going to talk more on mental illness. And then we're going to go on a few common treatments and how you can get help. And then we're going to answer a few of your questions. So if you have any questions tonight, please just write your questions on the comments below. And before we take a break, I just want to say thank you so much to Emmanuel Kinara. Thank you all the way from northern suburbs, Melbourne. Thank you so much. And Justin Juguna, thank you for your support tonight. And if you're watching tonight, let's hear where you're watching from. Let's hear the comments. Let's hear some love. And we know that we have the support. Thank you so much, guys. And we'll see you after this short break. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us again for another Power Pack Live YouTube show from here, The Connect. We are grateful for everything that you're doing, for the support, for the likes, for those who have subscribed. We say thank you so much for seeing the dream, seeing the vision, and also supporting everything that we're bringing out there. And this week, we want to say thank you to Dr. Elijah for just, saying yes to our call and just talking to people about very powerful stuff. And if you have any question, please don't hesitate. Write the questions down below on the comments, and we'll endeavor to answer your questions to the best of our ability. And again, we say thank you for joining us tonight. We have a great show lined for you. Next week, we have one of our very own. This guy is just great. I can just say that I lose words when I try to explain this guy. He goes by the name Justin Juguna. He's a Kenya community member. He's been serving since I arrived in this country, and he's always serving. He's always there for people, just sending out information. So we're gonna meet Justin next week. We talk about investment, we talk about corporate affairs, and we talk about money matters. So don't go anywhere. If you're watching tonight, be sure to join us next week, and we look at the corporate sector, investments, and what is happening during this pandemic. So thank you again for joining us tonight, and I say may God bless you wherever you are. If you haven't liked our videos, if you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe and follow and go watch all our videos so that you can support this channel. So apart from that, we say thank you, and may you continue coming and tell a friend to tell a friend, and that's how the channel grows. But from us tonight, we say thank you, and it's over. Back to you at the studio. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for joining us tonight. And it's just we're getting there. We started very well with this topic of mental health and mental illness. And now we're actually going to the other side where we want to understand what are some of the common treatments we might have. And I'll ask Doctor just to tell us briefly, what are some of the common treatments that are out there which can actually help our viewers tonight?
Thank you, Peter. So welcome back, everyone. And just with regard to treatments, this is a very, very abbreviated or shortened version of what you can expect to find out there. So we know, because we say this is a medical condition, there is obviously medications to treat it. These medications might be given orally, which means you swallow them, either as tablets or liquid or capsules, or they might be given in injection form. So there are people with certain types of mental illness who have difficulties popping the tablet every day or the capsule every day, so they get it in form of an injection. This also is true for people in treatment settings. They may require an injection, but often, and I find this to be true for Australia, it is a lot driven by choice. So if people have to have an injection, sometimes it is a choice that they make. There is also talk therapy or psychotherapy, and this is provided by people who have done certain courses that allow them to do that. There are certain types of talk therapy which I won't go into. One of the commonest is for the more common conditions like anxiety disorders, personality disorders, eating disorders, and we call that cognitive behavior therapy. And this type of therapy is one which tries to, it is a course of conversations that you have with your therapist, sometimes in presence of other people who have the same condition. And what it tries to do is, those ones, cognitive and behavior, which is trying to create a link between how you think and how you behave, and then trying to work with you so that you can try and change some of that. Then there is, of course, family therapy. There is electroconversive therapy, which historically has been very controversial. Electroconversive therapy is the use of electric current to try and reset some of the neurotransmitters in your brain. Those of you who watched the Jack Nicholson in Cuckoo's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest will have seen the extreme version of that. I've worked in hospitals over the years, and it's a very safe treatment when it works, but it doesn't work for everyone. That's another thing to say. There are other invasive treatments which we are seeing more uptake of in Australia, like transcranial magnetic stimulation, which works in the same principles of electroconversive therapy, but these ones are about stimulating some centers of your brain, and that way trying to reset things which may not be working as well. I earned self-help there because that is by far the most significant thing that anyone who is experiencing mental distress can do. There are things which you do that work for you and may not work for the next person. Going for a walk, having a pet, and doing things at home. Maybe engaging in certain pursuits like gardening or art, painting, coloring, etc. Those things are really important as not necessarily as form of treatment, but as a way of self-care. There are common issues with treatment which I would be unfair if I did not probably include, and those include the very elaborate side effect profile of some of the medications. There are certain medications that cause significant weight gain. There are other medications that make people to feel drowsy. They even change sometimes how someone appears, and that is a big deterrent, and it's a difficult area that we have when we have to work with people who experience mental illness, because you are weighing that against the signs and the symptoms of mental illness, and you are wondering whether the benefit is there. But I strongly advise that you take time, for those who may have that problem, you take time and work with your GP or your psychiatrist to find what might work for you without causing that significant difficulty. I've talked about the side effects. Metabolic complications are part of the complications, and when we talk about metabolic complications, it's not just weight gain. It's people having very high cholesterol sometimes. It's sometimes people even developing some type 2 diabetes. Sometimes it's people so it's more than weight gain. It's also probably sometimes even cardiovascular health and getting affected. There is also the issue of costs. In Australia, all medications and some psychological treatments are underwritten through the pharmaceutical benefit scheme. Majority of them, not all of them. Most types of mental illness will be treated pretty much free of charge in Australia, and that's a very good position to be in, because if we had time to talk about what is happening in Kenya, where I spent significant part of my time and doing my PhD research, the situation is very different, and this is a major source of concern for most people, because we are still using medications that were used in the 50s and 60s, and those medications have a much worse side effect profile. There is the issue of stigma. So people worry, if I'm taking an antidepressant, what are people going to say? Yeah. And those are issues. I've put compliance there because if you are going to take these medications long term, then there is always the worry and concern about, is that sustainable? Can you take a tablet every day for the rest of your life? If that is what the doctors ordered. And so that becomes an issue for some people, and some people drop off and they don't take the medications. Unfortunately, that causes a relapse of their illness. So they re-experience the illness. That's as much as I would like to say about treatment, Peter.
Yeah, so something that I wanted you to maybe repeat, and so that people can understand, is because people are afraid of reaching out because they think the cost involved is very expensive. So maybe just say a little bit more about how free that is and how people can actually go about getting such treatments. And then after that, we're gonna look at the cost of the pandemic. So we going in the good point where actually why we have this segment tonight, the effects of COVID-19 on people's mental health. But before that, doctor, I want you to just explain that the costing for this is actually nearly free so that people can understand that.
That's right. So the medications are highly subsidized through the pharmaceutical benefit scheme. Anyone who is treated as an inpatient will receive those medications free. But if you are getting them as an outpatient, there might be a very small cost, but it is very small percentage of what that medication actually costs. I have to say some of the medications for treating mental illness can be very, very expensive. We have medications for conditions like psychosis, which we call clozapine and risperidone. Those medications cost a lot. One injection of risperidone is almost $500, and the people have to take that every 2 weeks for as long as they need it. So obviously that's a cost factor, but that actually is made available free in Australia.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So tonight there's good news out there. If you feel you need help, just reach out, go see your GP, go see the specialist, and you'll get the help you need. So if you have any question tonight, I want you to write the questions down in the comments below, and we actually try and answer your questions to the best of our ability. But before we answer your questions, I want us to try and understand what are the impacts of COVID-19 maybe on people's mental health. If we can start with that, doctor.
Okay, so we won't, probably in the interest of time, we won't go into much detail about this. And I don't know whether, those of you who will be watching this should be able to just look at that slide and see. This is not my data. This is something that has been published, and there is consensus that COVID has impacted on us a lot. And we are going to see significant impact from COVID in the short term and in the medium to the long term. And those people who have spent time doing research here have actually narrowed down to how this might impact on our mental health. So for example, if you look at the slide which is on screen now, you'll see that when COVID came, there was the immediate impact that it had, which had to do with the threat, the insecurity that people felt on going to a public space or greeting another person. That makes people very uncomfortable. And I think it is still the case that we are very concerned about who we interact with and how that might put our health at risk. Then there is the bereavement. For those who have lost loved ones, we know that there is a strong relationship between bereavement, that is when you lose a loved one, and depression. And then we are also worried about what might happen. And there are things which we have put there about the indirect impacts of COVID, the lockdown, the isolation, the fear of potential economic impact. These things actually are very tied to how we feel emotionally, how we function, the amount of time that people are spending indoors and not being able to go out. That is very impactful from a mental health point of view. And it is right that the government has acknowledged that. They have put a bit more dollars on the services, the mental health services. We have even seen psychiatrists stepping up when the premier is giving the their daily figures so that they can speak about what they are doing about mental illness. I think for me, what concerns me is the medium to long term. What is this going to look like? We talked about the post-traumatic stress disorder, which might come from this. We don't even know because we are not there yet. We are still dealing with, 2 years later, we are still dealing with the short-term impact of COVID-19. What happens after that is anyone's guess. What might this mean for people who might have significant health impacts from COVID? What might this mean for people who lost their businesses, relationships, etc.? That is a major thing. So in a nutshell, Peter, that is what I would like to say about COVID. But there is a lot that we are yet to learn. There is not a lot. A lot has been written, but there is not much good research on what the actual impacts of COVID have been on mental health itself.
And then I'll ask maybe this question, just maybe on your own opinion, or what maybe you've been able to do, or what you've seen people do. What are some of the things that someone can do, especially during this lockdown, that can actually help them to maintain a very good mental health and to avoid the mental illnesses? Maybe from your own personal experience, and maybe what you've seen with other people, maybe trying to maintain a healthy mental space.
Thank you, Peter. Good question. We need more time to discuss that, but I would say one of the things is to know that this is not happening to you alone. What part of the reason why people experience distress is because they think this is just a problem. This is only their problem. This problem is impacting on everyone. A lot of people's lives have changed. Life circumstances have changed. Livelihoods have changed. Families have changed because of what has happened. This is affecting a lot of people, and you need to know that you are not alone. That is the first point I would make. The other point I would make is acknowledging and accepting that working and living in the current restricted environment means that you need to develop a structure that works for you. Don't just sit there and hope that tomorrow they are going to announce that everywhere is open and we are going to go. Well, I hope they do that. But while we wait for that to happen, just have a structure that works for you. If you are not able to go to the gym the way you used to go, what do? Create something that you are able to do. Find something that you are able to do that takes that place so that you are still able to function meaningfully. And then, of course, I would say, please look out after your friends and give them a call. Find out how they are going. Find out how they are coping with this. Sometimes talking about what is happening at the moment is the best solution that we can have. When you share your experience and what you are doing about your situation, that might help someone who is struggling. So that's all I would say about that, Peter.
Amazing. So there's a question there, but before we go to that question, maybe there's a few stages we discussed before, and it was about the treatment and recovery. Maybe you want to touch a little bit about the treatment and then recovery, and then after that, there's a question from Patrick. We'll try and answer that question from Patrick. So now we're going to talk about treatment and recovery. So, Doctor, over to you about treatment and recovery.
Yeah, good question, and thank you for reminding me about treatment and recovery. So we've talked about all these treatments. We've talked about the challenges associated with treatment, the fact that it has high side effects for some of the medications, the fact that they're actually stigmatized. What do I tell people if I'm taking an antidepressant? What are they going to think? So that's one side. But there is the recovery. Recovery means simply regaining health. That is what recovery is. But in mental health and illness context, what it means is actually being able to live despite the limitations that the illness imposes on you. So the recovery that I want to talk about here is not clinical recovery where you don't have symptoms of depression or anxiety or psychosis. No, it is to say that you can recover even if you have symptoms of schizophrenia, even if you have symptoms of bipolar, or even if you experience bipolar from time to time, you have learned how to adjust to that. Think of recovery like someone who has unfortunately had a road traffic accident or have had an illness and they have had to have amputation, but they still manage to use some devices to help them walk. maybe they will have a prosthesis and they are able to still continue ambulating and walking and going from point A to point B. Those people are having some form of recovery, despite the fact that they don't have two legs. So recovery in the mental health context is very important. And when you're working with your psychiatrist or physician or whoever, one of the things you need to spend time on is what might recovery look for me if I have depression or a severe form of anxiety or an eating disorder, etc. What might that look for me? How might I be able to survive despite the limitations that this illness imposes on me?
So right down there is a question from Patrick. I'm sure you can see the question on your side, but I'm just going to go straight. Thank you, Patrick, for that question. I'm just going to go straight and read the question. And the question goes, how can treatment outcomes be maximized by combining existing treatment options, that is medication, psychological therapist, with digital mental health interventions? So how
That's
can
a really,
they, yes, maximize?
thank you, Mr. Gadu. So that's a really good question. So how can treatment outcomes be maximized by combining existing treatment options with the digital mental health interventions? So I'm not sure. I'm hoping that you mean what I suspect. And digital mental health interventions, those of you who have been to the Beyond Blue website, you'll see a lot of self-help tools that people can use to try and navigate through some of the symptoms of distress that they might be experiencing. I'm assuming that is what Patrick means. So that is a really important point, that we don't want people to think that the only thing that they must take to get better are medications, or that they must just go and see a psychologist. This thing of self-help and using peer networks and using those digital mental health interventions are very important tools that get people to experience the kind of recovery I was talking about. So the just mapping what is helpful from those tools is also important, so that some things, and unfortunately this is this is something that we tend to see often, that you think something has worked for Peter, so you think it might work for you. It doesn't always work out that way. So you need to try a number of these things before you can you can settle on one that works for you. So to Patrick, I say yes, there is not one particular treatment that is going to be the magic cure, but if we combine this, the recovery journey is likely to be lighter. It's likely to be more enjoyable if you are leveraging all these, including peer networks, those digital tools you're talking about, medications, psychotherapies, etc. I hope I've answered that question for you, Patrick.
I hope we have, Patrick. If you have any concern as well, just write on the comments down there. Rob Camuren, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And before we winding up, and maybe to get your final remarks, but before we do that, what are the most important contacts maybe we can leave with our viewers tonight, Dr. If you have any important contacts, if someone wants to seek help, reach out for help, what are those important contacts that we should leave with our guests tonight?
Yes, I would just ask you to share the screen. So I would say that if you're in Victoria, and I encourage people to look this information up from the state which they are in. If you're in Victoria, we have a number of services, and we are sharing that screen there now. The point I make is, if you're in crisis, you need attention of people who provide what we call frontline services. So there are crisis assessment and treatment teams that can come out even to your home if you are either having a family member who is severely impacted by mental illness. They are not able to give a full account of themselves. They need immediate help. You need to contact those services. And we have provided that link there, which gives you more detailed information about what those services are. And once you call that pilot line, that 1300 number, that will go to the nearest mental health service to you, and that will activate the crisis assessment and treatment team. That is when you're in crisis. If you're not in crisis and all you are experiencing are certain symptoms which you suspect are mental illness, the first point of call is always your general practitioner. So those are the gatekeepers to the health service in Australia, the health services in Australia. And once they do the assessment and think that what you have is something they can treat, they will treat, and they are around to treat mental illness. But if what you have is something that requires care in an environment, in an hospital environment, then they will refer you to that environment. So that would be my response. But I hope you have flagged that slide which has got that link, and that's a clickable link which people can use. And or even if you Google mental health services Victoria, then you should be able to get that.
So maybe tonight, before we end, I just wanted to hear a few of your remarks, maybe what you can leave with our viewers tonight. Maybe it can be something regarding mental health. It can be a life skill. It might be a life hack, something that has worked for you. But tonight, maybe we want to get your final remarks and how people can maybe reach to you, maybe if they have any questions and everything. But what are your final remarks tonight, Dr.
Really easy, and I will go back to the issue of stigma, because we are seeing a lot of people suffering in silence. We are seeing a lot of people not being able to be forthcoming and to ask for help. I will only say this, that remember, and this is not my saying, someone else saying this, but I think it's an important mantra, that people who matter don't mind, and the people who mind don't matter. If people mind that you have a mental illness, probably they don't matter, because people who are close to you, family, friends, who are genuine, they will do something about your illness, and they will want to know how they can help you. So please feel free to share your experience with the loved ones. Don't suffer in silence. Ask for help. Mental illness, in the most instances, is treatable, and help is there, and Australia has made significant investments in this, and we hope that at some point in the future, Kenya will prioritize this as well. And a lot has happened. If I can just say that in the last couple of years, we now have a mental health policy in Kenya. We have a mental health plan, and we think things are going to get better for the future. So I hope that you found this discussion helpful, and I look forward to probably having another opportunity to have these conversations, Peter. Thank you.
Yes, from us, The Connect, we want to say thank you so much, Doctor, for your time and just accepting to be on this show tonight. And we're looking to even dig deeper and understand some of these terms that we've just, put out there: depression, anxiety, addictive disorders. And we actually hope that when we call on you, Doctor, you'll actually come back and just explain a little bit further, so that people can understand what is depression, what is this anxiety we're talking about, and how can they get help. So we will actually look for you, and we're looking forward to that discussion. But for tonight, we just want to say thank you for accepting the call and taking your time to come tonight. I hope the discussion has helped someone out there. You can replay this video over and over, and you can even share to a friend who you think needs the help. And if you think you need more and more of these such segments, please write on the comments down below, and we'll endeavor to bring the best we can bring, so that we can get our community or everybody out there the help they need. So tonight, I'm going to leave you with a very few remarks where it says, you cannot control the events of your life, but you can control your reaction. So however you react, that is you, that is on you. But whatever is happening to you, you cannot control. So be the control of your choices, and I hope you'll choose life. Thank you for tonight. Thank you for everybody who've tuned in, for the love, for everybody who makes this to happen. The Connect team, thank you so much. Our executive directors, our executive producers, I say thank you tonight. And all our viewers, we do this for you, and you make this happen. And we say thank you for joining us. And may you join us next week when we have a great guest. Justin Juguna will be on the hot seat as we discuss the impacts of COVID-19 on corporate affairs, on investment. And if you want to invest, this is your time. This is your session. Just come and understand how can you invest in such times and what's happening in investment. And this is gonna help some people out there. If you have any comments, if you have any feedback, please reach out to us on the comments. You can write us an email. You can always reach us on our social media or even give me a call, and I'm happy to hear your feedback. Thank you for tonight, and I say God bless. And I pray that you choose life. Thank you.